while Oni's personal Grim Reaper would usually be the one to be sent in assassination missions such as this. The situation did not call for a scalpel this time around. What was needed was a sledgehammer. Oni had been trying to ally themselves with the Senhili more closely over the last few years, since Tartarus and his brutes had been getting more bold with their demands for Forerunner technology. In return, the UNSC expected the brutes to take care of the Banished problem, a faction led by a mysterious brute named Atriox. It had all started as a band of pirates and ravagers, but over time, the brutes that didn't align themselves with Tartarus joined his side. The UNSC and elites had suffered plenty of casualties and had lost supply chains to this fledgling faction. While they operated in all sectors of space, their base of operations clearly fell within brute jurisdiction, meaning no one but the brutes would be able to launch a full-scale assault on them in order to end their attacks once and for all. Because of Tartarus' lack of initiative, Oni had begun to seek a more permanent solution, an alliance with the elites, and had begun sending in covert headhunters into brute space to gather intel on where the individual known as Atriox operated out of. Spartan Naomi 010 had been sent in with a small squad of scientists and ODSTs to San Helios in order to begin negotiations for a treaty, but the humans saw the devastation political warfare had taken on the elites. Giving up the head of the Prophet of Truth for return of the Shadow of Intent had labeled the Arbiter as weak, and the elite population had been split. Elite assassins worked in the shadows day and night to oust the Arbiter from power, which left him with less time to govern and more to focus on defending himself. He had sent his right-handed man, Rataz, to quell the separatists in other elite colonies, while he remained on San Helios, with one elite in particular being the leader of the majority of elites in open revolt. Naomi 010 had suggested that if the UNSC took care of his Jewel Mdama problem, that could free up the elite from several theaters of war, in order to help humanity track down and end the Banished once and for all. The Arbiter did not want to go into brute territory. He certainly wasn't afraid of the brutes, but while his race faced turmoil and revolution for years, the brutes had surprisingly found a more civilized way of dealing with the breakup of the Covenant. The Arbiter thought perhaps not more civilized, but certainly more effective. The brutes challenged the one wielding the Fist of Rukt, the legendary hammer of old, for control of their race's destiny, but Tartarus held on to power. Day after day, week after week, challengers came from all corners of brute space to attempt defeating the chieftain of the Jiralhani race, but they all crumbled at his feet. Tartarus had fought over 1,000 brutes over the course of years before the challenges had stopped, but this archaic and brutal way of dealing with power disputes had proven far more effective than civil war. Thelvadan believed the brute was purposely allowing the Banished to operate out of brute space in order to weaken the rest of the galaxy. After reluctantly agreeing to a truce that would be forged behind the brute's back, humanity would take all intel the elites had on Jewel Mdama and put an end to him once and for all. Thelvadan had discovered that Jewel concentrated half of his fleet on a Forerunner world known as Requiem, but he had not found the location even after years of searching. The other half of the Reformed Covenant fleet was focused on inciting rebels in the elite colonies, but the humans had found an object within one of the Halo rings. The object had activated momentarily and caused a lot of human casualties, but it had inadvertently spat out coordinates to a hidden location in space, followed by the words Shield World 000 Requiem. The moment the word was documented by Oni scientists, several UNSC AIs began to work together in compiling a mission report for the UNSC to strike Jewel Mdama and his forces. But seeing as they were in orbit around a Forerunner shield world, they needed a specialist in Forerunner technology. Admiral Sarah Osman had temporarily set Dr. Kathleen Halsey free with two purposes. Firstly, she would be brought on board the Infinity when they launched their attack on Jewel Mdama's fleet, and the second objective was far more valuable to her, as a personal friend of the Master Chief. By 2557, the UNSC AI designated Cortana had already been dispensed and deleted, in accordance with UNSC regulations, as all AIs were to expire within 7 years. Cortana had lasted longer than any AI in history, well, all except rogue AIs at least, but ultimately, Halsey had been freed to work on finding a cure for rampacy. She had not found the solution in time, however. Dr. Halsey claimed she could have, and would have, if they had let her out and do her work in this issue sooner, instead of keeping her locked up on the Ark. Ever since the dispensation of Cortana, the Master Chief had begun making mistakes, errors, something no one thought possible. Things got so bad that Blue Team had begun being put at risk due to his carelessness. In order to stop the Master Chief's reckless behavior, Fred had suggested giving up his AI, the weapon, to Master Chief. Chief did not accept this, as a compromise. He would not break the bond between Fred and the weapon. He had gone through it himself and knew he didn't want that for his brother. Thus, Halsey was tasked with making a new AI as close as possible to Cortana, even if it meant using part of her own brain matter. This would grant her a partial pardon. She would not be jailed, but she would not be entirely free. Halsey would have to spend the rest of her life working for Oni on deciphering Forerunner technology. This wasn't really a punishment for Halsey, but it meant she could not focus on anything else besides Forerunners. After Halsey was finally successful in making a new AI for the Master Chief, Blue Team was finally complete again. Without any more hesitation, the UNSC sent out the Infinity and its 10 accompanying frigates to put an end to the Storm faction. With the best captain on the fleet commanding the capital ship of the UNSC, humanity is confident they will win this battle easily against Julim Dama. After all, the commanding officer here is Jacob Keyes. His survival on Halo and triumph on the second ring had warranted a promotion. He had refused, but the Admiralty wanted to reward him. Instead, they gave him command of the ship being built in secrecy, the most expensive, most massive, and technologically advanced ship they had ever built, the Infinity. Blue Team is awoken from cryo-sleep. The Infinity has taken some damage, but most importantly, it has been disabled and is being pulled into the planet. Captain Keyes asks the Spartans to find a way to untether the Infinity from the Shield world. The new Cortana says,
"Isn't it a bit weird we are being pulled inside the planet?"
You get used to it.
Duly noted.
Captain Keyes tasks the Spartans with doing a hot drop on the planet while the Infinity fights off the Covenant. All ships are disabled, but he doesn't want to take the risk of them staying that way, especially with ships trying to board each other. The mission begins as they enter Requiem's atmosphere. The hot drop on the planet ends up landing them on the jungles of Requiem. The Spartans at first work on regrouping with Chief. He landed alone, surrounded by a forest fire, which was caused by the Spartans entering orbit and crash landing on the foresty jungle. His sensors are all thrown off, and he thinks his eyes are playing tricks on him, as several figures can be seen for a split moment through the flames. These figures keep on popping in and out of reality, but he knows better and realizes they are teleporting. As he walks through the fires, a knight jumps on top of him, knocking him on the ground. His new Cortana copy screams,
"Look out!"
but the knight is already on top of him. Chief manages to wrestle control of the situation by punching it in the face. The knight runs away by teleporting, but in its place, 10 crawlers pop into existence. They quickly rush him as he tries to fight them off, shooting, biting, and scratching at his armored legs and arms. He forgoes his assault rifle and instead starts tearing them apart with his bare hands. There's a rage that's been building up inside him since the deletion of Cortana, and him being paired up with this copy makes him feel like the UNSC is toying around with him. He needs an outlet to let this anger out, and the crawlers seem to be a good place to start. As he's finishing up tearing the crawlers apart by their little limbs, he sees 3 more shadows through the fire's approach. He rips the final crawler's skull off and takes the bolt shot from inside, aiming it at the figures approaching, ready to fire. When the sentinels swoop in from around him to put out the fires, as the smoke begins to clear up, he sees that 3 figures are Kelly, Fred, and Linda. Their regrouping is short, as they all acknowledge in green status. Chief's first order for them is to head to a clearing within the jungle. He points down the direction opposite from where the Infinity's crash landing.
Blue 2, lead the way. Blue 3, I want you on the trees. Get to high ground and cover us. Blue 4, stay and plant a beacon for the Infinity. Catch up with us ASAP.
Blue Team all acknowledges and they head out through the jungle. Linda leaps 10 feet into the air and onto a tree. She climbs through, distributing her weight accordingly to avoid breaking the branches, and makes her way onto the hill on the side. Her goal is to get clear sight of where they're going, and if there's any more enemies ahead. Fred holsters his DMR and takes out a pair of SMGs, leading the way next to the Chief with his assault rifle. The crawler's blue glow is difficult to spot in high noon, even with the Spartans' enhanced vision, but to keep their eyes peeled for any more attacks. Kelly, being the fastest, set up the beacon for the UNSC to know which way the Spartans are going, and to allow for a short-range communication, after which she can sprint through and catch up in a matter of seconds. The jungle seems to be teeming with these robotic AI-like beings that don't know whether to engage Blue Team or not. But the further they walk, the more attraction they gather. The Covenant that made it through the ceiling has begun to show up at this point. With a party of jackals in the trees, Fred and Chief are aware They are there, but Linda is getting to them faster than the two of them can look their way. They have full confidence in her skills as they walk through the jungle and Kelly has caught up with them. Linda informs them of a larger Covenant party up ahead. 8 elites, 20 grunts, 2 hunters, and an unknown number of jackals hiding in the trees, as well as a phantom setting down a stationary turret set up on a large rock. Linda suggests they take them out before the next phantom comes back to drop off more enemies. With Chief agreeing with her, they go to work. Blue team lines up spread around the Covenant forces, perfectly blending in with the jungle's foliage. The signal to commence is with Linda putting a single bullet through 2 elites and a grunt standing behind them. The Chief jumps over a rock he was hiding in, winning guns blazing, as Kelly runs up to the Covenant forces with her shotgun, pumping it and blasting them from a foot away, all while trying to redirect the hunters' attention. Linda is blasting down any jackals within the tree line that decide to pop out in an attempt to snipe the Spartans. But Fred is the only one that is pinned down, as the turret is keeping itself protected from Linda's sniper rifle, while blasting the area around Fred with heated plasma. His AI companion, the weapon, has an idea. Fred can toss a grenade to create a distraction of kicked up dirt and smoke, and use this to run the opposite way. If the grunt manning the turret looks either left to the grenade or right to Fred, Linda can take the shot. Fred follows through with a plan, and Linda shoots right through the grunt's face, exploding his face mask along his skull. Fred runs up the side of the rock and climbs up onto the turret to start shooting at the hunters by kicking the dead grunt's body off the turret. Though the hunters take damage, they begin to cover themselves with a shield. Chief focuses on gunning down every last elite left on the field while Linda covers him, and Kelly turns to run at the hunters' exposed backs, with her powerful shotgun shells blasting the worms out of the other end, quickly putting the first one down. But the second one shoots the fuel rod cannon on its arm at Fred and his turret, then takes a swing at Kelly with his shield. Fred has to jump out and stop providing covering fire, but Kelly is fast enough to dodge. After 2 more missed swings, the hunter's fuel rod has cooled down for another blast. But just so, Kelly jumps on top of the hunter, putting its own shield between the two. Chief turns his attention to the hunter while Fred uses his SMGs to rip holes into the remaining grunts and final elite alive, before he can reach the Master Chief with his sword. Fred puts a knife through the elite's leg and drop kicks him in the chest while shooting his SMGs. Chief lets off an entire magazine of assault rifle into the hunter from behind it while trying to shake Kelly off. In the sporadic movement, gives Linda the chance to shoot right through the exposed neck section of the hunter to put it down once and for all. Before they can be done reloading, however, the Phantom arrives back, blasting the area with its main gun. The sides split open as grunts on the turrets try to shoot at the Spartans on the ground, but Linda shoots right through the sides of the Phantom, taking out both grunts and half the Covenant before they can jump out. Kelly, being the fastest, hops on the turret instead and starts firing back, disabling the main weapon and putting some serious damage on the Phantom. Though the turret had taken a lot of damage, Kelly is confident that if she gets shot, she can move out of the way quickly enough. The pilot of the Phantom, having lost all of its covering fire, decides to crash the Phantom into the turret. Kelly leaps out of the turret seeing the Phantom coming at her, and uses the opportunity to jump on top of the Phantom itself. She runs along the Phantom's hull to infiltrate the inside, while the final forces of the Phantom hop out to meet their doom at the hands of the Chief and Fred on the bottom. Kelly strikes down the piloting grunt with a single punch in the face at full strength and takes over the flying vehicle. Linda runs through the tree line and ends up on a clearing above the Phantom, after which Kelly picks them all up and they take the Phantom to traverse Requiem faster. Their goal is to find the source of the anchor for the Infinity to be freed. The communications beacon Kelly had set up begins to come through as the Spartans receive data from Lasky. He tells him the captain is busy while the Infinity is holding off the Covenant with the Spartan force on board. While they go to the location of the gravity well they detected pulling them down to the planet, Blue Team must take out the well so the Infinity can rise once more. In the meantime, neither Covenant nor UNSC can really continue the fighting except for on the ground.
Acknowledged. Sir, possible hostile native creatures have been spotted. Do you require assistance?
Lasky doesn't answer Chief, but tells him as long as it's not flood, they can handle it. The Spartans plug a course to the gravity well and begin to head that way. Deep in brute space, a trading prowler while attached to a comet streaking through the vast emptiness. On board, a single Spartan and a piloting AI. The Spartan is performing regular maintenance checks on his equipment, both armor and weapons in this case. An alarm begins to sound off from the bridge. This is to be expected so deep in brute territory. But the Spartan doesn't concern himself. It's simply a proximity alarm. A slipspace portal opened up on the outer edges of the asteroid field his frigate has been inhabiting. The slipspace portal spits out a small vessel, trying to make contact. This does interest the Spartan. If this vessel knew he was here, it had to be sent by the very top officers at ONI, or his location had been compromised. Spartan does not decloak his ship, however. He allows the vessel to approach. Once it's dangerously close to a collision, he finally makes contact and decloaks.
Identify or your vessel will be destroyed.
Over the radio, Black Box, the AI most familiar for piloting Kilo 5 around, announces,
"No need for misdirected violence, Spartan. We come with news and a new assignment. Priority Alpha 1.
Speak the command now or you will be terminated.
If you must. November, Oscar, Bravo, Lima, Ecylon 6.
Standing by for new orders.
I will be brief, Spartan. Your new mission is to regroup with another operative on this sector and take out a high-value target.
Details?
Right. Spartan A-239 has gathered some intel indicating Oni's number 2 target has been spotted 3 light years from your current location. His report indicates Supreme Leader of the Banished, Atriox, is meeting with a former elite clan leader on the brute world of Dashmat. Your mission is to join A-239, wait until the meeting is over, and execute the Banished leader. The Spartan's report indicates Atriox will be at his most vulnerable then, only being accompanied by his personal vessel and its crew. You are to eliminate the target without evidence of UNSC presence in the sector.
Consider it done.
After accepting his new mission, the small ship flies around the closest local planet and uses a slingshot maneuver to gain some momentum and turn the opposite way. The momentum is carried through as a subspace portal opens up and the ship crosses. Just as fast as they arrived, they leave. Spartan B312 finishes preparing his gear. He asks the dumb AI piloting his prowler for all information on Dashmat. He listens carefully as he begins to plan his assault. He isn't used to working together with other headhunters, much less Spartans. The only experience he had in this regard is from 4 years prior, while working with the Spartan 2 company and their efforts on Unyielding Hierophant and their defeat of the Covenant forces on Onyx. 2 days later on Dashmat, the Spartan's vessel descends through the clouds, landing on a snowy tundra. With vast plains and rocky terrain, the Spartan lands the frigate expecting to meet up with A-239 Emil. But when he reaches the designated rendezvous location, he finds the Spartan isn't there. There was a simple message left for B312 on a datapad inside a cave. On it, geographical coordinates and 4 words. Meeting was cut short. Seeing the message, B312 sprints out of the cave and into his ship. The loading bay doors open and from within, revving sounds can be heard. As it grows louder, a prowling marauder emerges from within. The Spartan would prefer to use a warthog, but direct instructions indicated no UNSC presence must be left behind. B312 considers this maybe slower in the snowstorm ahead, but it couldn't be tracked back to him, due to it leaving no tracks by hovering off ground and its ability to cloak. While B312 is making his way to the coordinates, we discover what the cryptic message left behind was. Spartan A-239 Emil had tracked a group of elites to Dashmat as they were responsible for raiding a UNSC envoy vessel to Doisak, the homeworld of the Brutes. After Tartarus had refused to do anything about it, Emil had begun suspecting it was because the Brute was afraid. Tartarus had succeeded in maintaining power in Doisak and all Jirahani colonies since the collapse of the Covenant by defeating anyone who challenged him in a one-on-one combat. But Emil had spent a lot of time in Brute space now, and he knew more than most. The Brute was extraordinarily proficient and had only gotten stronger and more skilled after years of fighting, but he was still afraid of one. Tales of Atriox's strength were grand and monumental, but they were all true. Emil knew that deep in Tartarus' heart, he was afraid of Atriox. He knew he would lose, and his command of the Brute race would come to an end. Worst of all, he did not expect Atriox to be as merciful as him and let him live. Truthfully, Tartarus only allowed his challengers to live after disgracefully humiliating them. They would never try to challenge him again, and they would come to be domesticated by his power and strength. At first, he had killed hundreds of the Brutes challenging him, but seeing his forces dwindle, he decided to spare them only to subjugate them. After following the elites to Dashmat, Emil intercepted their transmissions and learned they planned to meet with Atriox himself. They wanted to join his Banished for protection from the Arbiter, as they themselves were pirates within Sanhili space, but they wanted to speak with Atriox for terms of their new employment with the Banished. Atriox had agreed, but not for the reason they thought. After hearing so, he contacted HICOM through emergency channels. They had told him to prioritize Atriox as a target, and they would be sending in backup. The second most wanted target on their list was worth letting those low-level pirates go. Emil passed on all details, and they told him his backup would be a Spartan. He had an idea of whom they were talking about, and while glad to have some backup for once, he did not want to be overshadowed. After working with the Master Chief on Installation 04, the aftermath reports only mentioned Chief and Cortana, and not Emil. Spartans shouldn't be seeking glory, but he thought it was unfair that his contribution in keeping Captain Keyes alive had been overlooked. A few days later, when Atriox had arrived and met with the elites, they were all surprised by the brute laughing at their face. They wanted to join the Banished for its protection, but they also wanted to be paid for being protected. The elites argued that they had several ships in their command and it could complement Atriox's fleet. One thing was certain, Atriox wanted their ships. In the span of a single minute, Atriox flipped the table they were gathering around and broke the skull of one of the elites with a single punch. He struck the second elite with his gravity hammer so hard, the elite was sent flying back into the wall 20 feet. The third elite was also struck by the hammer, but this one was impaled by the blade and dragged across the floor, leaving a stained trail of blood as the elite choked on his own blood. The final elite, who had the table flipped over on him, tried to get up, but Atriox simply put a foot on his head. The elite tried to take the brute's weight off him, but couldn't. By the time his brain thought of going for his sword, Atriox had just put more weight into his step and crushed the elite's head like a watermelon. While monitoring all of this, Emil knew what it meant. His deadline to get the target had been cut short. Emil had grown impatient waiting for the other Spartan in this operation. He'd also grown overconfident in his abilities. After the Human Covenant war had ended, he hadn't been properly challenged. Most of his assignments had been to find and kill insurgents, with only his recent assignment being to execute the elites Atriox had just taken care of for him. With all his bravado, Emil decided to leave a message for the Spartan they called the Grim Reaper and take care of this job himself. Emil left the cave thinking to himself,
"Let's see who Oni thinks is number one after this."
Emil managed to infiltrate Atriox's camp and stealthily take out any lookouts. The battle cruiser Atriox had arrived on was docked at the top of the mountain, while camp had been set at the bottom. Atriox's tent had been set up about a quarter of the way up the hill, leading up the mountain. As he made his way in, he saw a group of grunts carrying out the bodies of the dead elites. It had actually been surprisingly easy to sneak in, as the forces Atriox had brought were busy commandeering the ships the elites had brought. Atriox was celebrating his dozen new corvettes and a Ket-pattern battle cruiser. The elites had left for him. When Emil entered the tent, this was the Spartans' major mistake. Spartans were trained to make zero noise, even while wearing half-a-ton armor, such as Mjolnir. But Emil didn't consider how the stench of the dead elites' bodies had permeated within the tent. As soon as he entered, Atriox could smell him. Or rather, he couldn't. The only ones that would be entering to interrupt with their presence would be the grunts, and the stench of dead elite would waft from them. Atriox stood up, pretending to be distracted and intoxicated, walking right past his hammer. Seeing this, Emil thinks this is his best chance. He slowly unsheaths his blade and tries to quietly approach the brute. Just as the knife is inches away from striking inside the massive brute, Atriox swings his left arm wildly, thrusting with all his weight in a single push, knocking Emil down and away from him. He walks over to his gravity hammer as Emil picks himself up quickly to shoot him with his shotgun. As he pulls the trigger, all he sees is the pellets reflect off Atriox's energy shields. He pumps his shotgun. Off go more pellets, bouncing off the brute and some off the wall. The panic begins to set in as Atriox keeps on getting close and closing in the distance. The Spartan's aim is getting paradoxically worse. He shoots off his shotgun once more, but he might as well be shooting air at this point. The shields barely shimmer. Emil steadies his aim and points the barrel directly at Atriox's head. And right as he is about to get the next shot off, Atriox brings down the hammer with the blade facing down, cutting right through the shotgun, leaving it in two pieces. Emil instinctively tries to jump and roll away to pull out his knife. He planned to grab the knife and take out his grenade launcher, but mid-roll Atriox catches him, grabs him by the foot. Emil managed to reach the knife but wasn't expecting the brute's reaction to be so quickly. He gets caught off guard and doesn't have time to get the grenade launcher out. He begins to flail his knife at the brute, holding him by the foot. A few cuts peel through the brute's thick dark-haired hide, but nothing to concern himself about. He slams Emil down on the ground. The skull helm cracks, revealing part of Emil's face. With the force of the slam, Emil's knife comes loose from out of his hand and he drops it. The knife bounces a few feet away. Atriox taunts the Spartan, calling him a little demon, a child playing a very dangerous game. Emil turns over and tries to sit up quickly to grab his grenade launcher. He swings his arm in Atriox's direction to shoot. The tent entrance flaps open just as the brute brings the hammer down on Emil's head through the open gap in the skull helmet. Several DMR shots bounce off the brute's shields, but he lifts the dead Spartan by the head through the gravity hammer. Using his armored body as a meat shield, Spartan B312 runs at Atriox while letting off shots, trying to hit the massive enemy behind the already large Spartan. B312 aims for Aatrox's feet instead, to at least lower his shields, but the brute tosses the dead body at him. The Spartan dodges out of the way, but not quite in time, as he is partially struck with the limp body. Aatrox uses this opportunity to run at him, swinging his hammer. B312 dodges the strikes just barely, managing to outpace the hulking beast. He's still managing to shoot Aatrox from up close while dodging, bullets bouncing off the brute's shields on his feet, on his arms, on his chest, but the brute always protecting his head. Just before the brute's shields pop, the DMR runs out of ammo, and with the brute swinging his hammer, B312 does not have time to reload. He instead hits the brute with the butt of his weapon, expecting to stun the brute at least a little. And while the hit finally breaks the brute's shields, Aatrox wastes no time in retaliating with an attack of his own. He swings the hammer straight at B312 so fast he doesn't have a chance to react and move out of the way. Instead of taking the hit directly, he blocks it with his left arm, but the armor gauntlet of Mjolnir splits in half along with the Spartan's arm. His forearm, wide open with bone protruding through the armor, splitting pain of his arm slows him down for a moment, at which Aatrox swings his hammer back around directly into B312's chest, sending him flying back. The Spartan struggles to get up, but uses Emil's body as leverage to get himself up. The body had landed blocking something important from view of Aatrox, the dead Spartan's favorite knife, the blade he used to cut down hundreds of opponents. The Grim Reaper assassin knows he can't slow down now that the brute's shields are gone. This may be his only chance, but the knife will have to be his last resort. The brute has proven to be near unkillable from up close, and in his current condition, he doesn't want to try attacking from a short distance. With all the shots fired, reinforcements are surely seconds away from making it up the hill. Instead of trying to reload the DMR, he uses his right hand to quickly take out the sidearm and unload shot after shot at Aatrox. The brute blocks the shots with his hammer to avoid having bullets replace his brain matter. The constant shooting of the pistol manages very little though. Most bullets bounce off the hammer and crumble on the brute's armor. They do, however, manage to absolutely destroy one of the brute's fingers. Aatrox roars in pain, but just gets more angry. The adrenaline of the fight invigorates his fighting spirit, and he runs to the Spartan through the rain of bullets. When he reaches the Spartan, B312 has no bullets left in the chamber and instead uses Aatrox's own momentum to redirect a kick downward. The brute stumbles but doesn't fall. The Spartan holsters the pistol into his reload designated slot so that Mjolnir can do the work of reloading in a new magazine, planning to take out the brute here once and for all. But before he can, Aatrox punches him in the stomach. B312 grunts in pain as blood involuntarily flies out of his mouth, covering the part of his heads-up display. Aatrox had caused hairline fractures on the Spartan's ribs when he hit him with his gravity hammer on the chest. With this punch, some of those ribs finally give way and break, leaving the Spartan stunned. If only for a split second, it's enough, and the brute grabs him by the neck. He raises up B312, 2 feet off the ground, bringing him eye to eye. As he prepares to strike the Spartan down with his gravity hammer on his right hand, he raises it above the Spartan's head. B312 reveals he has Emil's knife by driving the blade right into the brute's right eye. Aatrox reflexively drops the Spartan. On his fall down, B312 rolls backwards into Emil's dropped grenade launcher. As he reaches for it, brutes, elites, and jackals all rush into the tent. The Spartan makes a quick decision by using the grenade launcher to shoot the ground between himself and Aatrox. The grenade bounces and explodes in front of the brute's face. Luckily enough for him though, one of the jackals managed to put his shield up in the way right before the grenade went off. As the dust settles, they see a hole cut through the back of the tent. B312 had quickly gotten up and run to the back of the tent and jumped out, leaving the flaps of the tent swaying in the cold breeze. At the back of the tent, there was nothing but a very steep fall down the side of the mountain that was not meant to be climbed. Aatrox grunts and gestures his head in the direction of the escaping Spartan. Several brutes run out the back and jump down to follow the Spartan, while Aatrox digs the knife out of his face. He approaches the back of the tent to look down the hill, but nothing much can be seen as a snowstorm is raging and the Spartan has already fallen about half a kilometer down the side of the mountain. The pursuing brutes are falling while chasing the Spartan, but his armor had finally managed to finish reloading the pistol on his side. B312 turns to look back while firing, to shoot the brutes in midair, taking them out one by one. Once he reaches the bottom of the side hill, it starts to even out. He hits some of the snowy rocks, bouncing off and still sliding down the hill. With a very rough landing, he ends up on his back. The grunt at the bottom patrolling hobbles over to see what just fell out of the sky. He sees a broken Spartan, sees that he's close to death, reaches down, but the brute bodies begin to land all around. The loud thump right behind the grunt startles him. Spartan uses this opportunity, as the moment the grunt turns around, he wraps his right arm around the grunt's head. But with the methane tank bulging from the grunt's back, he has a difficult time twisting the little creature's neck. He sighs and instead uses the sharp part of his bone that's sticking out of his forearm to stab the grunt through the face. B312 lets out a yell into the grunt's body. The pain is even more than a Spartan should have to handle. He takes the needler and begins to hobble away from the scene of the crime. He knows more brutes and elites and all sorts of enemies will be coming his way. As he stumbles away, he sees his marauder prowler. He shambles slowly to the vehicle as a group of drones are huddled around it for warmth. They had assumed it was one of theirs, as it was still warm from B312 driving it here. They see the Spartan approaching, but in the middle of the snowstorm they think it's a brute, until he gets close enough that it's too late. The cold stops them from taking flight. They end up receiving several needles piercing them, instantly killing them. The Spartan starts to hop on the prowling marauder when a pair of ghosts appear in the distance coming down the side of the mountain. He checks over his HUD, at least the parts that aren't covered in blood, and marks Spartan A239 as MIA. He hopes he's still close enough to activate the armor's kill function. B312 hops on the prowler and begins driving to the best of his abilities with one arm, and an incredible amount of pain. The ghosts start to catch up and shoot at him. While his shields take the brunt of the damage, one of the ghosts begins on focusing down the prowler instead, while the other focuses on him. He has very little luck evading, but just as his shields break, an explosion on the top of the mountain is seen, distracting the grunts driving the ghosts. He uses the distraction to ram his prowler into the ghost on his left, the one shooting the prowler itself. The force crushes the ghost and grunt altogether, but the prowler catches on fire. With an imminent explosion coming, the Spartan plans to get off the marauder, but the ghost still chasing him has broken his shields. He manages to get a few shots on him, scorching his back with plasma burns. B312 hits the brakes as hard as he can, and he goes flying out the vehicle, landing several yards ahead. The grunt right on his trail, not expecting it, has no time to react and runs right into the prowler as both vehicles go up in a blazing flame. Burnt and broken, the Spartan starts to crawl away. The cave where he hid his vessel and Emil's is just over a kilometer away at this point, but that's not his goal. His goal right now is to just put as much distance between himself and the Banished. The explosion from Emil's armor was surely enough of a distraction to slow down the Banished. As he crawls through the snow, his broken arm begins to numb out. Snow begins to cover him almost entirely, and he can see in the distance behind him the search party had discovered the burnt remains of the grunt and his prowling marauder. Though the snow has covered most of the trail he left behind while crawling away, the search party begins to spread out. One elite sees the trail and starts following it. As he closes the distance to the hurt Spartan, he starts to see the trail slightly more red with each step. More and more fresh blood that hasn't been covered by snow leads him directly to the Spartan. He tries to go in for the kill but completely underestimates the Spartan. He tries to ram his sword into him, but B312 kicks his arm as it's coming down and shoots the elite through the head with the needle. As quick and as silent as he possibly can make it, the battered Spartan crawls over to the dead elite's body to find the active camo unit. He activates it and uses all his strength to walk away toward the cave. Still over a kilometer away, his only goal in mind now is to survive. Under normal circumstances, he could make the run in under 2 minutes. Running with Mjolnir would cut through the snow as if it weren't even there. But in his current condition, it takes a Spartan almost half a day to cross the distance to the cave. He manages to elude the banshees flying overhead with a camo, but realistically, it would be near impossible for them to spot him with all the snow. Most of Atriox's forces are still focused on taking down the elites on his new ships, leaving a smaller search party for the Spartan. While B312 just barely manages to make it to the cave and his ship alive, he sets Emil's ship to self-destruct. A quick activation of old Cole Protocol routines means the ship and Emil's AI will blow up and leave no trace of UNSC activity. As long as he can get out of there, that is. His ship's dumb AI tries to greet him, but he shambles onto the cryo bay. Spartan says a few words while preparing the cryopod.
Plot a course to UNSC rendezvous point Theta 05 Lazarus 8. Capture of this vessel is unacceptable. If we are disabled or trapped, comply to Statute 1 of the Cole Protocol.
The AI does not respond. It's trying to catch up. Since it is a dumb AI, it's struggling to keep up with orders, but eventually it acknowledges. B312 climbs into the cryopod as the ship exits the cave and begins to take off. He can hear the explosion of Emil's ship in the distance, even while he's climbing into the cryopod, right as he begins to pass out and become frozen. You all demanded a part 2, and I returned to my regular style, and I hope this sufficed. I think I got a little too invested in the fight sequences, but I hope you liked them. Leaving a like helps me out a ton and shows me you want more. So if you want a part 3, hit that like and subscribe button. Thank you all very much for watching, and thank you for helping me reach 1,000 subs this week. I'm going to be giving away a canvas of this picture, the piece of art I had commissioned for the Fall of Sidonius 5, as part of the series Stories in the Halo Universe. And to celebrate reaching 1,000 subs, I'll pick a random person from the comments on that video. All you have to do is comment your favorite part of the story and I'll pick someone at random. So I guess it's not that random. Good luck on that account if you want this picture framed in your house. Thank you all so much for watching and staying tuned to these stories. Have a lovely day. Ivanico out.